If you're considering moving to Maryland, then you definitely need to know these 5 things before moving here. Because while there are plenty of great things about living in Maryland, there are some interesting and maybe even not so great things about living here that you need to know about beforehand. So let's just dive right into those. Hey everyone, my name is Eddie and I'm a realtor here in Maryland. And if this is your first time visiting the channel, thank you for being here. I've made it my mission to help people just like you determine the best places to move in Maryland. I give you the market updates, the top neighborhoods, and everything you should know before making a move here. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. All right, so the first thing you absolutely have to know about moving to Maryland is the county specific laws. And that's because Maryland is not one size fits all when it comes to rules and regulations and local laws. Each county kind of acts like its own individual state or territory, and it's kind of frustrating to people that move here. And it's a big determining factor on like where people move to here, because some counties have different politics than counties right next to it. They have different ideas about how school should work, different ideas about a ton of things. And an example of this is plastic bags. In some counties, you have to pay for plastic bags at the grocery store, while others you don't. And sometimes you forget because you shop in multiple counties because you're right on the line and you start bagging things up and realize you have to pay 5 cents per bag just to use them at the grocery store, while others don't have them at all and they just have the paper bag. So it is something to consider, but there's a ton of other laws that are different as well. Their environmental laws in some counties are different than others. So they might charge you more for runoff water from your house than a county right next door. And another prime example of that is Montgomery County versus Frederick County. Frederick County charges you 1 penny per year for the what they call the rain tax, which is how much water your house and your driveway and outbuildings displace before it gets into the waterways. It's a whole political thing, but Montgomery County charges you the maximum amount that they're allowed to. So you could see hundreds of dollars added to your tax bill for that rain tax. Some counties here also have stricter gun laws than others. So while Maryland has its own constitution, which has actually been more lenient in recent years in rulings than past years, there are counties that are more strict than other counties. And there's cities that don't allow it in certain areas where other cities do. So if you're concealed carrying here and you do have your wear and carry permit, some areas you could be in trouble for doing the same thing you did somewhere 20 minutes away. So you just have to be really careful about local laws and regulations here in Maryland. And the second thing you absolutely have to know about Maryland is that Maryland loves its speed cameras and its red light cameras. It seems like they're popping up everywhere. And while a lot of them you can understand because they're construction zones and they're around schools, and it's really hard to argue those, I think the biggest argument is how many they are and how many different places they are. And people just don't like a machine giving them tickets. And once you come here, you'll realize they really are all over the place. Again, mixed views on this. Some people think they're all for them, and some people think they're absolutely terrible and unconstitutional. And some states have actually struck them down for that. Their local courts have struck them down and they don't allow them. So it's a controversial thing. Some people hate them, and it actually causes people to slam on their brakes and go slower than the speed limit. And it causes way more issues than if they just weren't there at all in a lot of areas. And it's something to consider if you're going to move here. And the third thing to know about moving to Maryland is that the majority of people live in the middle of the state. And by the middle of the state, I mean everything to the west of the Chesapeake Bay and east of Hagerstown, Maryland. So it's everything like right in between Baltimore and DC. That's where all the action is. That's where the majority of the population in Maryland is going to be. And the reason is that's where the jobs are. I mean, if there was a ton of amazing jobs on the Eastern Shore, people would flock there in a second and live off of the tons of waterways that go off the Chesapeake Bay. And same with Western Maryland, west of Hagerstown. The mountains are beautiful out there. If there were just jobs there, people would be out there no problem. But all of the jobs in Maryland are focused around the DC metro and the Baltimore metro region. So that's where all the people decide to move to, because everyone's talking about drive time. And especially with the government jobs now and people having to return to work, people are much more focused on staying close around those cities. And most people usually cap it at about an hour drive and some 45 minutes. And that puts them in that central part of Maryland. And speaking of which part of Maryland you live in, that brings us to the fourth thing you should know about Maryland is that some areas have a very hyper local identity. And by that, I mean they love where they live and they defend it like it's the best place ever. And one of those is Baltimore. Pretty much anyone that lives in or around Baltimore in the county just thinks Baltimore is the best thing. And the funny part is everyone that lives outside of that area thinks it's the worst place and they could never live there. People that live there just love it. They love everything about it. They'll defend it to the death. And then people just 20 minutes outside of the limits just can't stand it. They say they could never live there. And the same thing with Annapolis. Annapolis is a very sailing type of culture. It's a water type of culture. It's a little bit more ritzy. And the people there just don't mesh with people from other areas of Maryland. So when you go there, there's definitely a culture that is ingrained there around the Naval Academy, around that sailing life. And if you're not into that, you just don't want to go there. And then I would say the DC suburbs right around DC and Maryland also have their own culture as well. And this is all about living in a suburb where you have a status. And that's because to live there, you have to have a certain level of income. That's just the facts. Places like Potomac and Bethesda and Chevy Chase and Travilla, these are areas where there's a price tag to live here. There's a status to living here. You're very close to your work. You probably work for the government in a high position, maybe in finance in a high position, in DC somewhere making a lot of money. So living there comes with its own type of status. And you can tell when you go there, once you're in, it's a specific type of community. And then you have Frederick, which is kind of like the gathering place of everyone that has come from all over. And it's such a unique place because no one has their own specific identity. It's just everyone is mixed together and you can't kind of pinpoint anyone. It does have more of an artsy culture than a lot of other areas in Maryland. And that's maybe one thing you can pick out. But other than that, you just have a mix of everybody from all over that just wants something that's more affordable while still having a really great city to go and visit or live right inside of with a ton of restaurants. So that's kind of like the transplant area of Maryland. And the fifth thing you should know about living in Maryland is that the school boundaries can be pretty confusing. Unlike some areas in the country, Maryland does not have county-wide school choice. So that means your address determines where your kids are districted to in public schools. And this is a huge topic here because people get redistricted all the time because Maryland's population is dense. So there's so many people in so many different areas. And when they build a new community, it changes the school boundaries. Or if they add a new high school, it changes them significantly, especially counties like Howard County and Montgomery County. It is so common to have your school boundaries changed on you, even if you think you're pretty safe within them, like far away from the current line. So it is something to consider when you're moving to Maryland, that you're not guaranteed the school that you're going to. You can start off at one and you're pretty likely to stay there, but it's still something that you have to keep in the back of your mind. And even with all this, it's important to know that Howard County and Montgomery County, they're actually known as having some of the best public schools in the entire country. So while they might have issues with districting and boundaries, they attract people from all over the country. And Maryland also has a very strong private school scene. So they're very competitive to get into some of them, especially right around DC. So that's something to consider if you want to get your kids into a private school. You might be driving from really far away, or you might have a lot of competition to get in just because there's a long waiting list. So that's it. Those are 5 things that I think you should know before moving to Maryland. And it's just 5 of many, many things that you should know before moving here. I can name 100 others just from living here my entire life. So if you have specific questions about what it's like living in Maryland, or you have a specific concern about you, your family, what it's like to live here, where you should move, the best area for you specifically, that is what I'm here for. I'm here to help you with your move and represent you in buying a home here in Maryland. So if that's you, make sure to click on the link in the description to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me, whether that's 2 weeks away or 2 years away. It's never too soon to make that call. We'll go over your move, get a plan together to make it as smooth as possible so that you have that fully ready to go when the time comes. And as always, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you stay up to date on all of my videos about moving to Maryland.